All right, so the US federal government is trying to solve a problem that, well, it kind of created itself. We're talking about a regulatory system so incredibly complex, it's literally been called a maze. Now, two new executive orders have just been issued to try and tackle this thing head on. So what exactly are these reforms and, why should we even care? Let's break it down.
To get a sense of the sheer scale we're dealing with here, just think about this number, 175,000. That's how many pages are in the U.S. Code of Federal Regulations. I mean, to put that into perspective, if you read one page every single minute for 8 hours a day, it would still take you more than a year to get through it. It's just a massive collection of rules that dictates, well, pretty much everything.
And look, the executive order itself admits it's far more than any citizen can possibly read, let alone fully understand. But here's where it gets really concerning. Hidden somewhere in those thousands and thousands of pages are, get this, an estimated hundreds of thousands of potential criminal offenses. That means you, or me, or some small business owner could accidentally become a federal criminal without ever meaning to break a law.
And that brings us right to the heart of the issue, the so-called regulatory crime. Now, to really get what these new reforms are trying to do, we need to understand a couple of key legal ideas that are at the center of this whole debate. So the first concept is mens rea. It's a Latin term you've probably heard on a bunch of legal dramas. It just translates to guilty mind. And it's this core principle that for most crimes, you have to have criminal intent. You have to actually know you're doing something wrong.
But, and this is a huge but, a lot of these regulatory offenses fall under a totally different standard called strict liability. And this is so important. Under strict liability, it doesn't matter what you intended. The act itself is enough to make you a criminal even if you had absolutely no idea you were violating some obscure rule buried on page 90,000 something. This is a major focus of these reforms.
Here's a really simple way to think about the difference. On one side, you've got mens rea. That's knowing intent. Think of a driver who's flooring it through a school zone on purpose. They know what they're doing is wrong. But on the other side, you have strict liability. This is like a business owner who accidentally misfiles a super complex form because of an honest mistake. In that case, the act alone could be enough for a conviction. See the difference?
So, how are these executive orders supposed to fix this mess? Well, the first part of the plan is actually pretty simple, but it's a massive undertaking: audit and expose. It's all about dragging these hidden rules out into the light by forcing federal agencies to be transparent. Section 4 of the order lays out this really clear three-step process. First, every federal agency has to go through and identify every single regulation they have that carries a criminal penalty. Second, they have to publish that full list online for everyone to see. And third, and this is the real kicker, the government is strongly discouraged from prosecuting anyone for breaking a rule that isn't on that public list. But, transparency is really only half the battle. The next part of the plan is to fundamentally change how the government even approaches enforcement. It's all about shifting the focus back to proving a person actually intended to do something wrong.
So the order creates new guidelines for when an agency can even refer a case for criminal charges. Now they have to consider stuff like, was there any real harm done? Did the person have some kind of specialized knowledge? And crucially, is there any evidence they were even aware of the law? It's basically a shift from, what did you do, to what did you know when you did it? And to stop this problem from just getting worse over time, there's a new rule for the future. From now on, any new regulations with criminal penalties have to explicitly include a mens rea requirement. This forces the regulators to spell out, right from the start, what level of intent is needed for it to be a crime. Now, this whole idea of cutting through regulatory complexity, it's not just some abstract legal debate. It has very real-world consequences. So that leads to the question, how does all this red tape actually impact major American industries?
Let's look at a specific case study that's actually outlined in a second executive order. It applies these exact same principles to the pharmaceutical industry. The whole goal here is to use regulatory reform to help bring the production of essential medicines back here to the United States. According to industry estimates mentioned in the order, this is how long it can take to just build a new pharmaceutical manufacturing plant in the U.S. 5 to 10 years. And a huge reason for that incredibly long timeline is this tangled web of federal, state, and local rules you have to navigate. So to fix this, the order demands a government-wide effort.
It's telling agencies like the FDA, the EPA, and the Army Corps of Engineers that they have to start working together, streamline their review processes, and get rid of redundant requirements. The objective is simple: make building these critical facilities faster and a whole lot more predictable.
So, when you zoom out, what's the big takeaway from these two orders? Well, this isn't just about making some small tweaks here and there. It really represents a pretty fundamental shift in the whole relationship between an individual and the government's regulatory power. And honestly, this quote from the first order just captures the core idea perfectly. The goal is to move away from a system that can accidentally turn well-meaning people into criminals and toward one that targets people who are intentionally breaking the law.
And that really brings us to the central debate that's always been at the heart of government regulation. Are these changes a necessary correction to government overreach, designed to protect our liberty? Or, on the other hand, do they risk weakening important health, safety, and environmental protections by making them that much harder to enforce? It's a tough question.